We are pleased to have with us renowned inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology. As a researcher at the Salk Institute, he pioneered in vitro RNA transfection technology. He subsequently pioneered many new innovations in the fields of RNA vaccination and immunization. We welcome his expertise. He is Dr. Robert Malone. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jimmy, and I look forward to sharing ideas with you and with your audience.
So, you seem to be the leading guy on mRNA vaccines. Could you explain to our audience what an mRNA vaccine is and how they protect against infectious diseases?
So that's a question that can carry us forward for the next 2 hours, or I can try to oversimplify everything. And so please forgive me because that's what I'm going to do,
Okay.
or we won't be able to talk about anything else. So I don't mean to in any way talk down to anyone, and if there's any molecular virologists in the audience, I apologize in advance. Um, the the core idea here and insight is that methods for developed for gene therapy purposes for correcting genetic errors, defects, can also be applied to generating immune response. So mRNA vaccines employ a molecule called RNA, which is in most cases derived from DNA. In the case of the virus itself, SARS-CoV-2, that's an RNA virus. That's how it carries its genetic information. It can be done either way, with DNA or with RNA in different viruses. But for this virus, it uses mRNA, it uses RNA. People are confused about the M part of the RNA. That's nothing to be afraid of. There are different types of RNA in cells. Some RNAs are used as scaffolding, as structure, for the little tiny biorobots inside of all of our cells called ribosomes that manufacture proteins. So that's one kind of RNA, ribosomal RNA. mRNA, the M stands for message, is the type of RNA that's used to carry information from the center part of your cell, the nucleus, where the DNA lives, out to those little protein manufacturing biorobots that are out in the cytoplasm, the outer part of your cell, that actually make the proteins. So don't be intimidated. The mRNA is just designating that it's one particular type of RNA. It's a message that goes to these little protein manufacturing facilities called ribosomes and causes them to make the protein from the virus called spike in this case. And it's a slightly modified version of spike. It was designed to make that protein that's produced a little easier for your B cells to recognize to make antibodies. Now, there's a lot of information that data suggesting that actually that wasn't the necessary, that modification, but it was believed to have been necessary back when they engineered the vaccine. The spike protein that's produced is largely the same as the spike protein produced from the virus. And we do know that the spike produced from the virus has certain types of toxicities. The people that did the engineering were not aware of those toxicities and problems at the time they did it. So yes, they did make some modifications to the spike protein when they engineered it for putting it into these genetic vaccines, but they weren't designed specifically to make it more safe. They were designed to make it more immunogenic, a better immunogen. Now, the important thing to understand about all this, I think, for all of us, is there are no perfect vaccines, just like there are no perfect drugs. Just like if I, with my table saw or a drill or anything else, if I use it wrong, inappropriately, without caution, I can cut off my finger or do damage. Likewise, drugs and vaccines have to be used intelligently and cautiously, and we have to understand the risks so that we can avoid them when it makes sense. And so there's much discussion and consternation about the fact that we don't fully understand the risks of these experimental products. And I think that there's merit to that. But like with everything in life, there's risks when we get into an airplane. There's risks when we get into our cars. And we, all of us, have learned to deal with those risks. What we think about, what we do, is we say, oh, when I get into my car and I need to go to the shopping center, is it a good idea to travel 65 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone? No, probably not. There's a good chance you're going to get a car wreck. So we all the time make decisions about what we do and how we do it based on an understanding of risks. The same is true with medicines, and the same is true for physicians. What's important for us to understand is because we're going to take risks, we need to understand those risks, and we need to have the information necessary for us to make an informed decision about whether or not we wish to take those risks. And that's kind of the core of my position here, is let's use the vaccines intelligently, and let's make sure that we really understand the risks, and that you and your audience understand the risks, because it's your body and you have the right to accept or reject a medical treatment. I believe that is a fundamental right.
So as long as as long as you left it there, let me just go ahead and I'm going to jump ahead and just ask you a question. What are the bioethics of the current campaign to get the vaccine in everyone's arm?
Personally, I find this public position confusing. It's not consistent with my training and my understanding of the proper practice of medicine and the proper practice of regulatory oversight. These vaccines are known. The government acknowledges that there are risks associated with these vaccines. This was not the case 6 to 9 months ago. So now they've taken the position, they acknowledge there are risks, and the risks that they formally acknowledge in the licensure package for the BioNTech product are incomplete. There are known in the literature numerous other risks, and the FDA in that licensure package acknowledges that there are other risks that remain uncharacterized, risks such as birth defects, the extent of which the cardiac risks manifest, etc. In addition, there are many other risks such as reactivation of latent viruses. We know this as shingles, also Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, and other viruses that can be triggered by vaccination, may also be triggered by the infection. So there is a portfolio of risks, only some of which are understood to any significant degree, many of which are known to exist, but they're not well characterized yet, even after all these many months of dosing of these experimental products. In my opinion, based on both decades of practice and international consensus as embodied in the Nuremberg trials and the Helsinki Accord and the Belmont Report here in the United States and captured in the Code of Federal Regulations, that's to say federal case law, as it's what's commonly known as the common rule. There are well-established practices which must be followed for experimental products. And in general, need to be followed for all medical procedures, such as when you go and have a surgery. You look like you're about in the same age bracket, more or less, as I am, and you may have experienced a colonoscopy or other practices, and if so, you'll recall when you had those that the surgeon came in and described, or whoever was going to perform the procedure, described the risks, and asked you if you willingly accepted those risks. That's typical medical practice. That's how we should perform medicine. We need to inform you of the risks in a full sense for a procedure or a medical product. Those have to be expressed in common language so that you can understand them. I can't hide those risks using fancy medical language. And you have to willingly accept those risks, whether it's an experimental product or a therapeutic or product that has already been approved. So 3 key things: full and complete disclosure of risks, as best as they're known at that time. The risks have to be communicated to you in language that you can understand. And you have the right an obligation to willingly accept those risks. In my opinion, the rights of the collective do not outweigh the rights of the individual. And that is explicitly true with medical practice. Now, there are those in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others where you've seen op-eds. And for instance, Atlantic Monthly, my journal that I'm not very happy with right now because of their attacking me. But you've seen these articles in the headlines of the Toronto Star, basically saying that it's acceptable to withhold medical care from those who have not taken vaccine.
What?
I strongly object to this. Okay. So there is a logic that if you don't accept vaccine, you really don't deserve to be treated on the same basis as somebody who did if you come into the hospital. Okay. And that is a slippery slope.
Whew.
We go from there. So what's the next thing? Well, let's see. The people that are at highest risk are obese. Well, obesity is something that you could control. That's your fault. You had too many McFries and too much sugary Coca-Cola. And so it's your fault that you're obese and at high risk for COVID. So maybe we shouldn't treat you. Maybe we shouldn't treat you if you smoked. It goes on and on and on. How deep is that hole? I strongly object to that kind of logic, but it's being promoted both across the United States in high-profile, papers of record, and in Canada, across Canada, like the Toronto Star. So you ask about the ethics. I strongly object to mandatory vaccination for multiple reasons. I believe it's not ethical, and it's also not good medical practice from the standpoint of a virologist and vaccinologist. What we're doing by excessively using vaccine inappropriately for people who don't really need it is that we're driving the virus to be able to escape through evolutionary selection the benefits of the vaccine. Now, we all understand how this works intuitively because most of us are aware that the agricultural practice in feedlots and other places of medicating or chicken houses, of medicating poultry